My name is Edward Heisler, Heisler. I was born in 1929. My father's name was Samuel Heisler. He was born in 1878. My mother's name is Sarah Heisler. Her maiden name was Davidovich. She was born in 1881. Now, my memory goes back pretty good. I can remember clearly 1934, 35, but I just want to tell you that we were a family of 10 children. The oldest one name was Necha. It's a Yiddish name, of course. Necha died during an epidemic as a teenager. The next oldest one is Leona, born in 1905. And quite frankly, I can't remember everybody else's date of birth. Bernard, Jewish name Baruch, was next in line. After him was Ethel. Her maiden name, of course, Heisler, but married name was Siegel. After that was Mendel, never married. He was a teacher. He was the only one, by the way, who worked outside our family business. And he eventually was managing a railroad station for the Czechoslovakian government. After Mendel comes Ruchel, also known as Rose, and she was married to Berger. And then comes David. His nickname was Dudi. And then came Mariam. And Mariam passed away after liberating from Auschwitz, or some other place where she eventually wound up. By the way, David also spent over 5 years in Hungarian work camps, eventually wound up in a German concentration camp. Mendel was a Czech officer during the war and became a prisoner of war with the Germans. Being Jewish, he was sent to a work camp, and he worked his way through into Russia behind the German lines. And when he was liberated by the Russians, they thought that they were actually liberated. Instead, the Russians put him into their work camp, and that's where he died. And let me go back to, after Mariam comes, his name was Jakub Heisler, for short, Yankel, Yiddish name Yankel. I am Edward, of course, and in Yiddish it was Elia. So we're now at 1935. My sister Leona immigrated to this country. Our uncle Abe, who lived in Buffalo, New York, came to visit, and he persuaded her to come. She did that, and she persuaded Ethel to come, and Ethel and Leona persuaded, both of them persuaded Rose to come. I'm sorry, Bernie. Bernie came next, also known as Baruch, so you know it's the same person. And then came Rose. We call her Ruchel, of course. She came here so late in 1939, the only way she could even get out was by plane. And no one in our town ever flew a plane. So she went by plane to Britain, where she took the Queen QE2, I think it was, the one that's anchored in Long Beach, California right now. Beautiful ship. I went to see it. And that gives you something of a coverage of my family. So 35, what I remember most was Leona going away, and I and my family escorted to a place called, the Hungarians called Beregszáz. The Hungarians had a name, the Czechs called it Berehova. Every town where we lived had two names, one Hungarian, one Czech. And I was probably about 6 years old. I'm losing my voice here, which is not great if I'm going to be speaking.
You're doing great.
So
you want a little water?
It's okay. Leave it go for a minute. Okay, so what amazed me was to see.
Get you some water if you want.
That's okay. What amazed me was to see this giant train which I've never seen in my life, because we had kind of a trunk train that used to come to our town, a smaller gauge, and that stayed in my memory like forever. And to me, it was amazing. Incidentally, Bernie, my brother, was drafted during the war into the American Army, where he spent about 4.5 years. And he went through Africa and wound up in Marseille, France. And there's actually a story all by itself here, but I don't want to get sidetracked. So I will continue with our life in Bilka as it was. It was 1939 when the war was about to start, and Dr. Benesch, who was president, actually he was the second president for the country, Masaryk was the first, and he could not get any help. The Germans wanted to take part of Czechoslovakia. He was reluctant to do that, but Britain and France, that had an agreement to protect Czechoslovakia, didn't do it and wouldn't do it. So he simply surrendered because he couldn't hold off the Germans very long. He could have probably held them up for a while because natural borders, which are mountains, but sooner or later the Czech army would be massacred.
This was 1939?
1939.
Did you sense the danger before 39?
No, before 39 we lived very harmoniously. There was no problems. Sure, you heard the word Žid by the Russians who lived there, which means Jew.
Yeah, so there was some anti-Semitism.
There always was. Catholic churches were teaching them to hate Jews. On an Easter, when they go through about the Jews killing Jesus, there was always a great time for starting the hatred, but that's as far as it went. A lot of them depended on making a living from the Jews, so you can't necessarily bite the hand that feeds you either. So it was kind of a mutual understanding. I don't bother you, you don't bother me. If they called me a Jew, or as they called a Žid, I would call them back something else. And I felt we were even. So when the Hungarians took over, I just want to give you a little bio of what happened between the time the Czechs actually disintegrated and the Hungarians came in. A group called Ukraine something else, which I don't remember, they formed their own little government. And they were aligned with Hitler. In spite of that, when the Hungarians came in, they didn't like that idea at all, what they did. And they took them out of town. Let's say it was the west side of town. And they killed them all. I didn't see that. There's about a dozen of them. But what I did see when I was 10 years old was they were loaded up on a wagon drawn with horses, and they're taking them from the west side of town to the east side of town to bury them. They actually bury them where they bury cattle. And to this day, if I close my eyes, I can see blood dripping in the street. So that was really a show of force, that you better get in line because this is what happens to you if you don't. It was quite a message. After that, everything just stayed fairly normal as it was under the Czech government. Because my father knew Austrian-Hungarian government and Hungarian at some time breaking away from the Austrians. But I just knew the Czechs, followed by the by the Ukrainians, followed by the Hungarians, followed again by the Czechs, and followed by the USSR that annexed our part of the country. Just so you know what it looks like over there. It seems like everybody wanted it, and there was really nothing there worthwhile to take. But nevertheless, it seems important to these countries to grab one piece of land. That's one of the problems of the world. Somebody always wants something that somebody else has. And that hasn't changed much, I don't believe. It's between people too. If you want to relax your life and live with what you have, you can live very well. But once you start wanting what other people have, that doesn't work too good. Countries operate the same way. So things were going along. They didn't bother the Jews. I think it was 1942 when the Hungarians started flexing their muscles. They had a group called Nyilas. That's the Hungarian name of the Nazis who were aligned with the Germans. And they did start flexing their muscles. They took over the government. The government had you might call him a benevolent dictator. His name was Horthy, but he lost control of the government. It was the Nyilases that took over. In 1942 is when we started wearing a yellow star to identify us as Jews. Now, we live in a small town, and everybody knew who was what. I didn't need a yellow star to tell them I'm Jewish. Everybody in town knew I was Jewish. Everybody knew what church people went to, which was, let's say, the Catholic or the Orthodox, Russian Orthodox, or there was a small Hungarian church. But you knew everybody who it was. In 1943, I was excluded from attending Boy Scouts simply because I was Jewish. Now, I didn't have much time for Boy Scouts anyway. I attended Hebrew school 7 days a week. It's not like children here that go Sunday school or maybe a couple times a week. And I had pretty good Jewish education, Hebrew too, by the way. So I could speak Hebrew, but Hebrew was not spoken. You just read the books and you understood, because the rabbis did not want to speak Hebrew. They called that Lushan Kodesh, which means holy language, to be used only for praying or for reading the Bible. Subsequently, I never learned to speak Hebrew, but I certainly did understand. So that was one of my languages. Yiddish, I could read and write Yiddish. I could read Hungarian and write it. I could read Czech, read and write. And I could read Russian, read and write. Subsequently, I learned German the hard way in Auschwitz and Birkenau, and learned French when I lived in France for years. So I knew a lot of languages. But the ones I told you that I really could read and write, that was the main languages for me. 1944, I finished 8th grade. I'm sorry, 43 I finished 8th grade, and I subsequently could not continue school. Jews were not allowed to go to high school. And as you can notice, this all escalated by year by year by year. 1944 is when we were taken away from our home. So my mother, my father, my brother Jack, myself, and my sister Miriam, we were the 5 left at home, because David was already in a work camp, and Manuel Mendy, as we call him, was also already in a German work camp. And we were taken to same barracks as we talked about earlier, to a brick factory, which was the equivalent of something of a ghetto. The difference was, as you look at the Warsaw ghetto, they lived in very small apartments. We lived outdoors practically. It was a brick factory. There was buildings that had nothing but roofs. That's where they dried bricks. It was early spring, very cold, and we were living outside. It was not bad for me, let's say, and Jack and Miriam, But my mother and father in their mid-60s, at that point, they were old people. We don't call 60s old anymore, but in 1944, that was considered old, sleeping outside with a blanket on the floor, on a concrete floor. That was quite a shock to your system. And that's where we really stayed not a long time. There was nothing organized there. The only thing that organized was Hebrew school got organized quickly. Religious people would not allow children not to be educated. That was amazing. We had no running water. We had no bathroom facilities. It was all outdoor stuff. And you were asked to bring your own food. And keep in mind, some people didn't have enough food for 2 days in a row. Sure, we brought food. We had a big farm. We grew a lot more than we needed. So we were one of the fortunate ones. But there was other people in town who did well. It was a population 10,000, approximately 12 to 1,500 Jews, which is quite a percentage. But the reason is there was the biggest town around us. And the little towns didn't have any stores. So they came to our town to shop. We had a fabulous marketplace, what they call a flea market now. That was there every Tuesday or Wednesday, I can't remember. And people from out of town used to come from Hungary, from Czechoslovakia, selling everything from clothing to food to livestock. It was a huge market. So that's why Jewish people lived there, because there was opportunity for business. And so now let's get back to the ghetto. Approximately 2 weeks later, the trains that you've seen probably in movies, cattle cars, started arriving. That was the first time I seen a German soldier. Up to that point, it was all Hungarians. The Hungarians are just as bad as the Germans. There is a movie, if you want to see what the Hungarians did, it's called The Music Box.
Oh, good.
That would really give you a flavor of what the Hungarians did. Now,
the Ukrainians too.
Yeah, oh sure. They were the worst.
They did the job for the Germans.
Yes, they did. They were awful. They're still bad, by the way, the Ukrainians. Nasty people. But in case you get a feeling that the Germans did it, you better think again. Because Austria became part of Germany, Italy was involved, and I mentioned Hungary, Romania, even Poland, occupied by the Germans, had plenty of time to pick on the Jews. Estonia or something to that effect, those small countries that the Russians occupied during World War I, I believe, and many more. And so the Germans didn't do it alone. Even the Swiss, with their sterling reputation, they didn't treat the Jews that well that tried to run away from Germany. They turned them back at the border, and if they came, they didn't treat them well. And to top it off with, they had to sign over anything they owned in Germany. And they were also purchasing agents for the Germans, where the Germans couldn't buy certain material, like, let's say, ball bearings. Nobody would sell them because used for the war. But the Swiss could buy it and resell it to them. They were paid in gold. Most of the gold is what they took away from the Jews. Even the gold teeth were taken out and paid for it. So, and look what they did with the Jewish bank accounts. They turned over some money. It's like pulling teeth. Compound interest didn't exist. They settled for less than was actually put in there. And I'm going to take a time out on this.
Okay. You want to take a little break?
Yeah, I do. I got to take a drink of water.
Okay, you're on. Go.
Okay. I'm going to continue with the train in a minute. I just want to tell you, first of all, that I did have a bar mitzvah before the Holocaust. And everybody in my family did. And everybody in town always had a bar mitzvah. We only had two kind of Jews there. One was Orthodox and one was ultra-Orthodox. So my father belonged to the Orthodox. And the only one that I knew in town who did not attend services was the doctor, but he did always show up for New Year's, for Rosh Hashanah, and for Yom Kippur. That just tells you the flavor of the town Jewish community. The Catholics used to march in the streets on certain days, but we didn't do that. Simchas Torah, we did that marching, but only on our own premises. We had a big temple and big yard, and so they used to go and dance with the tourists outside. But we never went in the streets. I don't know. Maybe it just isn't a Jewish thing. Maybe it's done now. And now I want to go back to tell you about the train. Every day the train started coming, and you didn't see what they were doing because you were not allowed to go near it, only the people they took. But when our turn came, they squeezed in as many people as they could to the train, into each car. They gave you an empty bucket, and they gave you a bucket full of water. You can imagine what the empty bucket was for. So
these are like cattle cars.
Yes, cattle cars, exactly. And standing room only. You couldn't sit down even if you tried. Well, it was supposed to have been a trip that takes maybe 6 hours. It turned out to be 3 days. And water ran out pretty fast. And the little windows on those cattle car had barbed wire on them. But I remember putting my hand out and catching water as it was raining or snow and drink it, whatever you could. So naturally everybody wanted to be by a window. Unfortunately, there was only 4 windows. 3 days later, we arrived in a place we'd never heard of, never seen, didn't even know where we were. We did know we were in Poland because we crossed from Czechoslovakia, and you could see signs in Polish. And that actually what it was Birkenau. The Germans also called it Auschwitz II. And if you've seen any movies, maybe the Schindler's List or some other ones, Schindler's List is not one of my favorite. There was one time a whole series of shows that was made for television, I think about 6, 7, way back when, that depicted the Holocaust a lot more realistically. The thing about Schindler's List that it's really not the Holocaust, because the people survived. In the Holocaust, your chance of surviving was slim. So I'll just leave it at that. I'm not going to criticize the movie. It was a great movie. A lot of people seen it, and it was good.
You probably got an idea what it was.
It was a good thing to do, and I thank Schindler for not Schindler, but
Schindler and
Schindler actually took advantage of the people. They worked for free, but eventually he did a good thing anyway. But I'm talking about the director of the movie. So I think he did good. So here we are in Birkenau. And the procedure was they chased you off the trains so fast. I can see it if I close my eyes. German soldiers with those German shepherd dogs chasing people in a hurry. I don't know what the big rush was, but subsequently I found out that they were separating people. We lined up. You could see that in the movie where they lined people up. And they put men in one place, women in another place, lined up, old men, old women, and mothers with children. If they wouldn't give up their children, went with the old people. And I didn't find out until I was liberated that they actually gassed, let's say murdered, would be a better word, and cremated the old people and the children the same day that we arrived. Just as a side note to it, I attended Hebrew school, roughly 20 boys. The girls didn't go to Hebrew school, by the way, whatever reason, that's what it was. And I'm the only one from my Hebrew school class who survived, only because I was tall. So, in case you want to know what I did to survive, I grew tall. That was first step anyway. So you can see how this worked. We were separated, of course, from my parents. Never had a chance to say goodbye. My sister went in a different place. And it's kind of a weird place, separating and don't even say goodbye or anything. And I stayed with my brother Jack. And we stayed in Birkenau, by the way. We were put into these barracks that I believe the beds were 5 high, if you want to call them beds. There were shelves. You got a blanket, you slept on a wooden shelf, and you had one blanket, which is probably more than you can expect in a place like that. I got to backtrack for a minute. When we got out of the car, the cattle car, 3 people died in that car. We didn't even know they were dead. We were squeezed in so tightly that they were actually standing up there somewhat. And it was no different in Birkenau, where we spent a couple of weeks in that camp, and we were tattooed May the 31st. And my number is, let's see if I can even remember it, A10123. And my brother Jack's number is A10122. So you can see where I was practically attached to his hip. Didn't walk away from him. Jack was 5.5 years older than I am. And I was 14, so sometimes I was just sitting there wondering, how did all this happen to me, coming from a normal home into a situation like this? But that's what it was.
Was he tall?
Yes.
As tall as you?
No, about an inch shorter. He was the shortest in the family. And Mendel was the tallest, but I estimate 5'4".
Okay.
David about 5'2". I'm sorry, 6'2". Make that 6'2".
6'2", yeah.
Yeah.
Like you're 6
both of
now.
them. Yeah.
You're over 6 foot now.
I'm 6 even. So, you know, you can't help wondering. I want to throw in here our menu, if it ever arrived, was a slice of bread in the morning and black coffee and a bowl of soup for lunch. And the soup, like all soups, have a lot of water. These soups were like 90% water, 95%. Some vegetables in there, sometimes a few noodles. And this is, incidentally, was the menu every day that I was in that camp.
Was that once a day?
Once a day. That's it. Bread in the morning, and that. So, after we were tattooed, they came around looking for people who worked or knew about farming, and my brother Jack said, we volunteer for this. Farms have food. So we did. Some other people did volunteer. We walked to a place called Birkenau Hof, which means Birkenau Yard. It was a farm. There was cows there. There was all kind of stuff that goes on in a place. There was some 2 barns of horses. I'm thinking 50 horses. They were in 2 separate barns. I was assigned to work with horses. Jack was assigned to work in the field. Everything in the field was done by hand. And it was, you cut by hand, you chopped by hand, you were digging by hand, and all this had to be done and a bowl of soup and a slice of bread a day, and the day was as long as there was sunshine, you worked. And if you worked with the horses, you worked 1 hour earlier and you stayed 1 hour later to take care of the horses when they came back, take care of the horses in the morning to feed them. And you could sometimes steal something from the horses, straight out of the horse's mouth, right? And if they had carrots, you ate a carrot. If they had a beet, you ate a beet. Sometimes they even had apples, which was pretty good. But you had to be very careful because you could be beaten to a pulp. I remember chewing on oats. So don't get excited that my menu got fortified big. Because when I was liberated, I still only weighed about 85 pounds, 6 feet tall. Take a look at me now. I weigh 180 pounds. I'm still 6 feet tall, and I'm not overweight a whole lot.
No, you look good.
So you can just imagine what I look like. I don't have a picture, which is probably just as well. And when I'm doing this right now, there's a skeleton. I look pretty close to that. So it was a horrible situation. And there's no need going day by day what we did. But every day people used to come back from the field beaten up, bleeding from the nose, from the ears, from the mouth. And their favorite place to hit you was on your head.
Wow.
I was hit on the head one time, a couple of three times at one time, though. And I was able to get away from it. And that was that. So my job was cleaning up after the horses. And coincidentally enough, my cousin's son, my second cousin, who was there, his son did the same job in the other place. He was my age, my same name as mine, named after the same, my grandfather. And cleaning up after the horses. They even had a job title called Scheissmeister. So the horse mate, I cleaned up. But I think they were very nice to me. They gave me a shovel. They could have made me do that with my hands, but being the Germans were so nice, they gave me a shovel to do it. And so all day long, I didn't have much to do. I had to fix up the place, take out the dirty straw, bring in clean straw, so when the horses came back, everything was good. The horses were more valuable to them than the people. Now, what they were doing was, people in the field couldn't survive on that menu and work. I might throw this in. They had two classifications of workers, the Germans. One was called forced labor. They lived at home and they worked someplace. They were forced to work. And they got their rations and they got paid. And the second category was slave labor. That was us. The theory was to work you to death. That's it. Because that kind of a menu was exactly what was happening. And once a week, once a month, they would take the people out who couldn't walk. 20-year-old people are walking without any strength to pick up their feet, just shuffle along. And they called them Musulman. A German teacher, a teacher was teaching German in a high school, told me what it translates to. I knew all along. It couldn't work anymore. He said, it translates roughly to half dead. And they would take him out and take him to Birkenau. We had no idea what they were doing with him. Even at that point, we still didn't have an idea that they're actually killing people. And that's what they were doing to those people. They couldn't use them anymore. They worked them to death. Except they couldn't wait for him to die, so they gassed him, cremated him. So this is what was going on day in and day out. Sometimes in the midsummer, there was a transport that came in from Belgium. And like we used to look healthy, they did. And the SS trooper who was in charge of the horse barns, he decided to take those people and replace the ones he had because nobody looked very healthy anymore. The problem was that these people didn't know nothing about horses. As best as I can remember, they were candy makers, they were watchmakers, that kind of stuff. And they're driving these wagons which are huge because the horses were Clydesdales. And they were turning over wagons. And they were getting beaten up every inch of the way. They were all beating up on them. And they were coming in and the SS officer started looking for replacements. I volunteered to take a wagon because I grew up with wagons. But I didn't grow up with Clydesdale horses. But I managed. So I replaced them and told them that my brother Jack works in a field who's probably one of the best horsemen here. They went and they got him. Now, I'm not trying to take credit to save Jack's life, but I believe I did. Because no one survived out in the field. There's just X amount of work that you can do on that menu and work 16, 18 hours. It's just unbelievable. So Jack took over running on. Now, I just want to explain to you, we worked longer hours with the horses, but we didn't work hard. We sat and took care of the wagon, the horses, and you had people who were loading them. My experience was that the women were loading the wagons. They would line up like 2 rows, and they just keep pushing the hay or something. And some of them were Italian girls. Now, I don't know if they were Jewish Italian or Christians, it don't matter. They were always singing. And I thought they were singing a Hungarian song that was translated in Italy, but I think the Hungarians didn't write many songs. It was translated from Italian to Hungarian. It's called La Campagnola Bella. Well, sooner or later I learned to ask them in Italian, Canta la Campagnola Bella, and they will sing. To this day, sometimes I sit down and I play a harmonica, and I learned to play the song well. So I actually had a harmonica way back when. All my brothers were playing violins, but I never made it because of the war. So I got a harmonica, and I learned to play it. So these girls who have a menu, what I just described, I presume that's what they were getting. It was all cooked in Auschwitz, by the way. And they go out there and they load wagons and they sing. I guess it's an Italian thing to sing.
Yeah, probably keep them happy.
And they sang very beautifully. There was actually some pleasure to listen to. Music, it's amazing what music does to you. And we're abandoning music in schools because it's a better idea to cut taxes for the rich than to run schools, I guess. So I don't recognize this country anymore. In 1946, when I came here, I thought this was the best country in the world. Unfortunately, it probably still is, but it's not the same country that I came to. I can tell you that outright. I'm living fine. There's no problem. But I look around me, and there's an awful lot of people who are not living good.
Here in the United States.
Right here in the United States. A place where I just can't comprehend, where every day on the New York Stock Exchange, in the Chicago Exchange, in the LA Exchange, literally trillions of dollars change hands. Some people make profit, some lose. And paying taxes is a dirty word. to help out the ones who can't make it. I think we need to really think about this. I can think about it, but I can't do nothing about it.
You can sympathize, that's about it.
Yeah, well, I can give $1 here and there to somebody when you get off the freeway. I'm not sure how much good that does or doesn't. It's not my problem. Yeah. I give him the $1. He wants to buy beer, be my guest. I can't teach him what to do. No. But I can give away a few dollars. But our government don't want to do that anymore. They even hate the idea that there's Social Security. Just imagine what this country would look like without Social Security.
Yeah.
Or unemployment, or Medicare, or welfare. And this is exactly what we have. I don't want to make this partisan of Democrat, Republican, but the Republicans have been trying to do away with social programs all their life. Incidentally, they never voted. A single Republican never even voted for Medicare or Social Security. I presume unemployment either. They voted for bootstraps so you can pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Yeah. I think that's their program. So I have to tell you I'm a Democrat.
Me too.
Okay, I'm not ashamed of it. You want to call me liberal? The L word, go ahead. All these good programs came as a result of Democrats, not Republicans.
Yep.
Republicans only cut taxes, mainly for the rich. They really needed a tax cut in 2001. We're talking about millionaires got a hefty tax cut. Yeah. That's what this country really needed. I think I think I got away from what I was doing. Yeah? So anyway,
so you didn't talk about your liberation.
Yeah, I'm getting to the liberation. That's essentially that's what took place in that camp, day in and day out, 7 days a week. 7 days a week this was going on. We had a rabbi in our midst, a young man, and he conducted services, by the way. I attended him. I came from a place where my father maybe didn't go services in the summer every day because he was managing a farm and an orchard and forest and everything else that we owned. But in the winter, he went every morning to temple every night. So that's, therefore, when this rabbi was conducting services, I would attend. Why not? That's how I was brought up. And I'm going to now just leave it at that point because there's nothing much more I can tell you.
Okay. Just about when you came to the United States.
But I want to talk to you about liberation now.
Yeah.
How it came about. I got sick sometimes late in November, I think, mid-November. I can't really relate to dates. No calendar, you know.
Yeah.
And my hand got swollen. It was swelling bigger and bigger. And we had a Hungarian doctor, a Jewish Hungarian. I just want to tell you, the Jews were Hungarians. The Czech Jews were Jews.
Oh.
There's a distinction there. You can, I'm sure, figure it out. They were first Hungarian. We were first Jews. So he was a Hungarian doctor, and he said, I can't keep you here anymore. So he sent me to Auschwitz. Usually they were sending people like me to Birkenau. But you could hear at that point Russian artillery. So the Germans were getting ready that the Russians will take over.
This was 1944?
44, November. And they wanted to show that this was a work camp. Nothing was further from the truth. But that's what they wanted to leave. So they opened up the hospitals in Auschwitz. That used to be a Polish army camp. So there was a hospital there, but it was never used. And so that was my luck. It was always luck that worked out for you if you had some. And I was operated on. And the operation didn't work, so a second operation was ordered. And same doctor, there was only one doctor there. And I remember distinctly seeing two men in white coats taking notes. They were not helping him, they were just taking notes. The second operation, the doctor tells me, I don't have much ether to give you. I will give you some just to take off the edge, and you may feel it. Well, I felt it fine. It was fantastic. I was tied down because he knew I'm going to feel it. And the same two men were there taking notes. So I have to believe it was an experiment, because there was a lot of experimenting going on in Auschwitz. If you really like to see what was going on there, just go on the computer, www, and that would be the medical experiments in Auschwitz, and you will get an eyeful. Subsequently, my brother Jack came to the hospital too. Every tip of his fingers was frozen. Every tip of his toes were frozen. And he was in the next building. I would have never known he's there, except an orderly from our hometown was there. He came over and told me that your brother Jack is here. That's the only time Jack and I were separated at that point. And he arranged that we'll meet at lunchtime at the window, because you're not allowed to walk around from building to building. So I talked to him every day. And they were not doing much for him. And so we're now in December. We'll skip to January. I was coming along, I was beginning to heal somewhat. I'm guessing the 20th of January, SS troopers came to the hospital and at a quick glance looked to see who looked capable of walking away. And they were walking him to Germany. The clothing was very skimpy, and it was very cold there. I would guess it was like 20 below zero, somewhere around there. And they took people out. I remember one time, fairly old guy who was sleeping next to me, they took him away, and they were walking. And I've talked to somebody who made that walk. He said half of the people never reached Germany. They died or got killed along the way. And they left me behind, they left Jack behind. And all of a sudden, you don't see anybody. The date is not exact. It could be 2 days more or less. I remember 4 or 5 days goes by when they stopped bringing food. So I presume they left at that point. So we still had running water. And the 27th, after about roughly 5 days, I wrapped myself up in blankets. I had slippers, I didn't have any shoes. And I walked out to see what's going on. No food, don't see anybody. And I looked around, the place looked deserted. Nobody dared leave the building. And I was about ready to go in when I noticed a Russian soldier. He came in very nonchalant-like. He had his rifle over his shoulder, hanging rather than carrying it. It looked deserted to him too. Well, he called me over and asked me in Russian. I believe I said it, maybe I didn't say. I attended Russian school, so I could converse with him fine. But I might just throw in that we had dual schooling, Russian, Czech. When the Czechs were taken over, it was Russian, Hungarian. You could choose the school you want to go to. Anyway, I'm getting back to the Russian soldier. He asked me, are there any Germans here? I says, no, they've been gone for days. He shut up a flare, and 200-300 showed up almost instantly. The Russian army came with horse-driven wagons. A couple of trucks came in. The trucks had USA on them. They never even repainted them.
Wow.
That was that Lend-Lease situation. And Auschwitz was liberated. There was 1,250 sick prisoners were liberated. I got that out of a dictionary, not a dictionary, an encyclopedia in the Wiesenfeld Center. I never counted them, but evidently they did. Mm. So they were all sick. You would think that they would bring some doctors in or some food. None of that happened.
Wow.
My brother Jack befriended a man. He came from France, originally from Germany, and he escaped Germany to France, and the Germans caught up to him there. So he worked in Auschwitz in the kitchen, and he knew where the food was. Every building, the bottom floor, which was like half basement, half, they had small window, was full of whatever. A lot of it was food, clothing. I remember seeing stacks of German money, Deutsches Mark. First of all, I didn't think the war getting over, German money would be worth, but it was good. I never took any money. We were taking food, we were taking clothing, because we didn't have anything. And
well, the food helped keep you alive.
Yeah, so there was 3 of us going, and we just really loaded up on food and clothing. There was canned meat, there was canned butter, whatever you're looking for. And we came across some frozen meat. Well, I would have never touched it because I didn't know you can eat that meat. But the guy from France did know. We didn't have electricity in that town. How would we have frozen meat unless it's frozen in winter on its own? So he says, we're going to take this meat because we're going to cook it, he says. If we were looking at him, the man must be crazy. Mm-hmm. So we took a garbage can and we somehow made up a barbecue out of it, and we were cooking meat and eating. It was great, except my brother Jack got sick. Like half of the camp got sick. Some of them died. Jack was, I looked at him and I thought that he was on the way. But I was nursing him along, making him, I'd like to make him tea, but I didn't have any tea, so I made him hot water to drink.
Well, he got sick from the food?
From the food, from eating meat.
Well, how about you? Did you eat the meat?
I ate too, but evidently my stomach is made out of iron, I guess. I can eat hot chili peppers fine.
Wow.
So, you know, maybe it's good.
Yeah.
I like him, I eat him sometimes. But it really got to Jack. Jack was different than me. Jack was a gentle kind of a guy. I'm kind of a tough guy, so maybe my stomach is tough too. So that was our liberation.
Okay.
School children asked me, was there a big celebration? I said, no. No one had the energy to celebrate. And besides, that was the day I found out that my parents were killed, murdered. Because Jack and I were going to go and look for him. And someone who worked in the area, we worked on a farm, said, the 2 of you probably went stir crazy that you'd think you're going to find your parents. Your parents were killed the same day you arrived.
Wow.
So what kind of celebration was that? The Russians started giving us papers to travel with. It was in Polish and in Russian. And the minute they gave us those papers, the 3 of us packed up with everything we had and left. We went through the wall that was broken through by artillery firing. You know, I'd like to go back for a few seconds. I used to sit in the window.
Wait, I'm going to turn this one around. Okay.
I used to sit in the window at night watching bombing of the city of Auschwitz. Auschwitz, I guess, is what the Polish people called it. And they, oh, wait a minute, I think maybe I lost this.
Yeah.
Okay.
What happened to it? That's all right.
It pulled off.
I'm still, yeah.
Is that the little thing I'm holding? Just speaking.
Oh, here it is.
That's okay. I can hold
I can
it.
clip it on.
Doesn't matter. I learned to make do
I could see that. I could see
along
that.
the way. I can make something out of nothing, I guess.
That's
But
and that's probably one big reason why it helped you survive, being that way with that kind of attitude
I don't
or
know.
ability. That's special.
Well, one teacher explained why I survived. Because some child asked me, why are you doing this? Coming to school to churn up all these memories. I said, the pay is good. You know, so the teacher said, that is the reason you survived, because
You don't expect
it's a joke. Everything's a joke to you. Fine. Whatever.
I think a sense of humor helps.
It doesn't hurt. It really doesn't hurt. So,
Not as bad as some other things, huh?
so that's where we left in a hurry. I thought we left very fast, but I looked at those papers. I have a copy of it. It says February 28th, so I was there a day longer than well, it was a long month, because February
Yeah,
28th, you know. So anyway, we were afraid to go out through the gate. We found a hole in the wall that the Russian artillery made, and we went out that way into town. And we had this wagon, like 2 wheels, you know, with a flat top. We loaded up as much as we could. We went into town, and we were looking for a place where we can stay. And the Polish people were not too much
What
interested.
town was this?
Auschwitz.
Auschwitz.
Auschwitz,
Yeah.
or whatever it's called.
Oh,
I'll just continue, okay?
yeah. Go ahead.
So we finally we found a house that would take us in by promising him that we would share the food. And we were willing to do that. And so we stayed there. I don't know if they took us in because they wanted to or because the food, it really doesn't matter. They took us in. We were there maybe 3 or 4 days when the man who lives there comes back and he tells us that the Russians are looking for everyone who left the camp. And I wasn't interested in going back to camp. First of all, I've learned from my father that the Russians were not very good people. I keep hearing it's the government. No, it's not the government, it's the people. So we decided we're not going back there. We packed up everything we could. We made makeshift backpacks out of jackets or whatever we had, and packed food and packed clothing. And he took us to the railroad tracks and pointed in the direction to go to Krakow. Krakow would be on the way to go home.
It's the closest town, huh?
Well, that was the closest big city. Not that close, by the way. So I don't know what it is about going home, but you might get more flavor if you look at that website that I gave you. There was something about going home. I don't know what I was going to find when I got home.
Yeah.
But we're going. The French guy is coming with us because the war was going on. He couldn't go anyplace. He also didn't want to stay in camp. So he says, can I go with you? Why not? You know. So we're going. And we walked all day. We started, I'd say about 5 o'clock in the morning. We stopped about 9. We walked on the railroad tracks because there was not as much snow there as would be.
You knew what direction you were going in.
Well, he told us.
Oh.
Well, at that point, we were hoping this guy is not sending us on a wild goose chase. But anyway, he was a nice enough man. He directed us, and we stopped in this town. Whatever town that was, I don't know. Small town. The mayor's office was in his house.